Let me ask you something that most people have never been asked. How old are your cells? Not the number on your ID card, but the actual biological age of the cells inside your body right now. A large-scale clinical trial found that more than half of its participants had a biological age significantly older than their calendar age, 50 on paper, but the cells already functioning like 60 or 70. And that gap widens faster the older you get. Here's what today's video is about. That gap can be closed, not with expensive supplements or grueling workouts, but with strategic periods of simply not eating, fasting, and the most important thing I want you to take away today is this: the older you are, the longer your fasting window needs to be. Not because of weight loss or blood sugar management, but because the molecular level miracles of cellular rejuvenation that happen during fasting become harder and harder to trigger as your biology ages, and require more time to switch on. To understand why, we need to look at what actually happens inside the body as it ages. Scientists describe this in terms of the hallmarks of aging, and two of them are at the center of today's conversation: the accumulation of senescent cells, what researchers now call zombie cells, and the progressive decline of autophagy. Zombie cells are cells that have divided so many times, they've stopped dividing altogether. They don't die, they just sit there, releasing a constant, low-level stream of inflammatory signals into surrounding tissue, like a broken factory that won't shut down but keeps pumping out toxic fumes. The critical problem is that these cells accumulate exponentially with age. In your 30s, they're barely present. By your 50s, they can make up roughly 10% of tissue. By your 70s, upwards of 17%. The chronic inflammation they generate is now understood to be the shared root of diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, dementia, and cancer. No food can clear them, but fasting, specifically, the cellular cleanup process called autophagy, that fasting triggers, is one of the most powerful natural tools we have for doing exactly that. Autophagy means self-eating in Greek. It is the process by which your cells disassemble their own damaged components, broken proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, toxic debris, and recycle them into raw materials for building new, functional structures. When you're young, autophagy runs actively and keeps your cells clean and efficient. But research shows that autophagy activity begins declining noticeably after age 40, and by the time people reach their 60s, it operates at roughly half the capacity seen in young adults. When autophagy slows down, the cellular garbage accumulates. Damaged proteins clump together, mitochondria degrade, inflammatory pathways activate. Dozens of studies have established direct links between declining autophagy and the development of Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and multiple forms of cancer. Fasting is the most powerful natural switch for turning autophagy back on. But aging makes that switch harder to flip, which is precisely why the fasting window needs to be longer. Here's the concrete evidence for that claim. When a young person fasts for 12 hours, insulin drops enough to allow meaningful autophagy activation. But as insulin resistance develops with age, and it does in virtually everyone, gradually and silently, the same 12-hour window no longer produces the same metabolic shift. Post-meal insulin stays elevated longer in older adults. And since insulin is the master suppressor of autophagy, the window needed to get insulin low enough for autophagy to begin in earnest extends to 14, 16, or in some cases 18 hours. This is not a personal failing. It is a biological reality of aging metabolism, and it means the strategy that worked for you at 35 needs to be recalibrated at 50 or 60. Now let me tell you what the science actually found. A study published in 2024 in one of the world's most prestigious scientific journals followed adults between the ages of 18 and 70 through 3 monthly cycles of a fasting-type dietary intervention, lasting 5 days each month. After those 3 cycles, participants' biological age calculated from validated blood biomarkers, including blood sugar, inflammation, liver function, kidney function, and cholesterol, decreased by an average of 2.5 years. Not a subjective impression, a measured reduction in biological age, confirmed by 2 independent clinical trials. Insulin resistance dropped significantly, liver fat decreased, The ratio of lymphoid to myeloid immune cells, a validated marker of immune system aging, shifted toward a younger profile. And critically, participants over 40 showed even stronger rejuvenating effects than younger participants. The older the person, the more dramatic the cellular turnaround. That finding alone should change how we think about fasting and aging. The second mechanism involves growth hormone. Most people think of growth hormone as relevant only for children and teenagers, but in adults, it plays an essential role in maintaining muscle mass, breaking down fat, rebuilding cells, and preserving bone density. The problem is that growth hormone declines steeply with age, dropping by roughly 2/3 between your 20s and your 60s. What most people don't know is that fasting triggers a dramatic surge in growth hormone release, with studies showing increases of 5 to 14 times normal levels within 24 hours of fasting in both men and women. The reason is simple: insulin suppresses growth hormone release. When you eat constantly throughout the day, insulin is perpetually elevated and growth hormone never gets the signal to rise. Fasting lowers insulin, and the body responds by flooding the system with growth hormone. The muscle-preserving, fat-mobilizing, cell-repairing effects of this surge are significant, and they're free available every time you create a sufficient fasting window. The third mechanism involves IGF-1, a growth signaling protein. In young adults, high IGF-1 supports growth and tissue repair. But after midlife, chronically elevated IGF-1 keeps the mTOR pathway, the cellular growth accelerator, permanently switched on. When mTOR stays on, autophagy is suppressed. Zombie cells accumulate unchecked, and conditions for cancer cell growth become more favorable. Research has shown that in adults under 65, higher protein intake and elevated IGF-1 are associated with meaningfully increased cancer rates. Fasting reduces IGF-1 and suppresses mTOR, creating conditions in which autophagy can run. Zombie cells can be cleared, and cell renewal can occur. Important caveat: in adults over 65, IGF-1 that drops too low can accelerate muscle loss, which is why fasting strategy must be calibrated by age, as I'll explain shortly. So what does smart fasting actually look like at different life stages? In your 30s to early 40s, a 12 to 14 hour overnight fast is your foundation. Finishing dinner by 8 p.m. and eating breakfast at 8 or 10 a.m. creates this window naturally, building on your sleep. Your insulin sensitivity is still relatively robust, so this shorter window is sufficient for meaningful autophagy activation. More importantly, establishing this habit now dramatically slows the cellular aging that begins accelerating in your 40s. From your mid-40s through your mid-50s, extending to 14 to 16 hours becomes increasingly valuable. This is when insulin resistance begins rising and autophagy efficiency starts its decline. Finishing dinner by 7 p.m. and eating your first meal around 11 a.m. to noon achieves this comfortably. You don't need to do this every day. Practicing this pattern 3 to 4 days per week, with 12-hour windows on other days, is a sustainable approach that delivers strong cellular benefits without exhaustion or muscle loss. Safety is non-negotiable, so please hear this clearly. If you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes and take insulin or glucose-lowering medications, extended fasting can cause dangerous hypoglycemia. Please speak with your doctor before changing your eating window. The same applies if you are pregnant, breastfeeding, a teenager, or have any history of disordered eating. If you have kidney disease, heart disease, or low body weight, medical supervision is essential before attempting extended fasting. If you experience severe dizziness, heart palpitations, or shaking during a fast, eat something immediately and contact a healthcare provider. Everything in this video is lifestyle information for generally healthy adults, and is not a substitute for individualized medical guidance. Tonight, finish dinner 1 hour earlier than usual. That one choice activates a cascade of molecular events inside your cells that no pill, injection, or procedure can replicate. Your cells are waiting for the signal. Give it to them. If this video added value to your life, please like it and subscribe, and share it with someone who is serious about aging well. Leave a comment telling me how many hours you currently fast. and what changes you've noticed. I'll see you in the next video.